Since 1975, the Engineers Joint Contract Documents Committee, the EJCDC, has been creating and updating fair and balanced standard documents that represent leading-edge contractual practices among all parties to engineering design and construction projects. The EJCDC has just published the 2016 edition of the Design-Build family of documents. Last updated in 2009, the new edition includes 10 completely new documents that bring the Design-Build family to the leading edge of 21st century business practices. The following presentation on the new Design-Build documents was given by Brian Johnson at a construction conference in Orlando, Florida, in March 2016.
This year we're going to be including for the first time a request for qualifications, a request for proposal form, a price proposal form, an agreement between the owner and the design builder for progressive design build, which to the best of our knowledge is the first form contract like that in the industry. And another new document we're going to have is the construction subcontract for design build project, which consolidates some multiple other contracts we had, and we'll discuss that later. One of the other new documents that we have in this series is the teaming agreement, which is, I think, a very important document because in this design build engineering phase, as we'll see as we get later on in here, is that during the proposal phases, there's often some engineering work that's required in the early parts, even before the proposal is submitted. And this teaming agreement addresses some of the concerns in the industry that have been voiced during that, related with this pre-award type work. We've also got a design builder's payment application that's a new document, a supplementary conditions form, which is new, a work change directive form, and a change order form. This is generally, for the basis of our discussion, it's somewhat simplified, but in the design build world, typically you've got an owner who has a consultant or owner's rep that works directly for him. You've got an owner who's contracted directly to a design builder, and then that design builder usually either has subcontractors or maybe even a general contractor that works for him if the design builder's performing in a construction management capacity. And oftentimes also, the design builder entity might not have the engineering expertise on staff, and then therefore they have a subcontract with an engineering firm that they bring on to provide the design portion of the design build project. I'm going to spend some time now going through the different documents, but as we go through them, you'll see too how these different documents contribute to the different parts of the design build project. First, we're going to talk about the procurement stage documents. We're going to try to go through this in sequential order. I think it makes more sense to do that than to just go by the document numbers. The first one we're going to talk about is the request for qualifications. And as I mentioned, this is a new document. One of the big things that this document provides is it provides one of two-step options to go forward through the RFQ. The first step is a qualifications-based step. And this is, as you'll see here, this is what leads into our progressive contract type of qualification. This is typically a quals-based only selection where the owner goes out to look for a design builder without providing the technical proposal or the RFP, which we'll run into. But this is where you bring your design builder on early and work with him to develop a price and then you can use the progressive design build document that we mentioned earlier if you were to go down this step one. This step two process is what I would call the typical arrangement that I see in my practice working with local governments, which is where you submit a technical proposal and a price proposal as part of a RFP that's subsequently issued after the RFQ is issued. That leads into our request for proposal form. This content of this document is, like I mentioned, it's used in conjunction with the RFQ document. The RFQ phase, you'll usually shortlist a list of potential bidders and proposers down to, say, 3 to 5 parties, and then then those parties would be given the RFP document for submitting proposals. The RFP procurement steps includes what I just mentioned, the shortlisting, and then there's the interviews and negotiations that's built into the document. Also, it talks about the selection and award, the steps and procedures of how that's done, and there's options provided in the document. And then also, too, one of the key things, too, is it ties into, well, here's the contract you should expect if you were to win the project. And we've tied this here to, a couple of examples that we've put here that's also included in the form, as it provides reference to our EJCDC 520 stipulated price or the 525 cost plus contract between the design builder and the owner. So after the RFP document, the next sequential one in steps is the price proposal form, which we provide that would be included in the RFP and provides the formal, this is how we want the prices set forth when we get the bids for consistency between potential bidders. The way the form's set up is that when they submit it, that it must stay open, the bids must stay open for 60 days. The design builder must verify that it's visited the site and is familiar with the general and local conditions. The design builder has a reasonable right to rely on information provided by the owner. There's pricing options based on a lump sum, unit price, price plus time, and the cost plus fee. And it also addresses the time of completion element when you submit the proposal, because not only do you need to know the price, but it's also important to owners and contractors alike to be able to establish the time frames within what do you see the project being completed in. So a summary of the procurement steps, or procurement documents, as we've talked about. Now we have if we start with the RFQ, we have a step 1, where we go through and we have a quals-based selection. It pretty much ends at that step. Or we get on to step 2, which relates to the RFP document, which is our D111 document, or and then that would tie into the D425 document, which is our proposal form. Now, if you have a question from an owner's perspective, you're saying, wow, this procurement process seems like a lot of work. What if the owner wants to bring in a consultant to help it navigate this process? And that's why we have our owner's consultant document. And if we go back to our earlier step, here's what we're talking about here. This is a party that's contracted directly to the owner to assist him in this design build procurement process. The document we would use that we were providing for that's the D500 document. This agreement it's used not only for when we're working through the procurement stage, but also even prior to that, this form's used to bring the engineer on when you're doing the planning for the project. And also you would use this document too to provide consulting services during the course of the project as an owner's rep type roles. The scope of services focuses on the preliminary services in the document that we have. And it has a limited role after the project is underway, but numerous options are added for additional services. So the way this document's set up is it's very general, and you have the ability to work through it and pick the services that are tailor fit to your project. So the document's made in a general sense, which allows us to have a wide use over many different types of projects. Now, from the design builder's perspective, you're saying, wow, this procurement process seems like a lot of work too. The owner wants me to submit a design as part of my technical proposal. How would I get my engineer to help me with my proposal? And this is where we go into the teaming stage document. And I mentioned this earlier. This is a new document for us, the D580 teaming agreement. This document is tailored specifically for design builder bringing on an engineer. But it can easily be modified too for a design builder to bring on other parties that it might need during the proposal teaming agreement, such as subcontractors. One of the big parts of teaming agreements is, you want to bring people on to your team and have them exclusively committed to you throughout the project, and also be able to establish some of the confidentiality and non-disclosure elements of documents that might be exposed during this pre-award phase. This teaming agreement is structured different than others in the industry because what we're contemplating here is that we're actually going to be bringing an engineer on to provide some preliminary engineering services in the beginning of the project. As you might know, I know I can speak for a lot of DOT projects that I work with, is that we're getting the owner's providing a conceptual set of documents, and engineers are being required to bring that up to like a 30% level to include with a proposal that's submitted during the selection process. Our document's somewhat unique because it addresses some of the liability issues that consulting engineers are seeing during this teaming process. I'll have an example of that later. Also, too, our contract includes a lot of different termination provisions that there's many reasons that parties might need to get out of a teaming relationship. One might be they're unable to reach an agreement on price later, or the procurement phase changes. There's multiple reasons. We've got a very robust terminology in there that you can pick from of termination provisions that would be applicable for the project that you're working on. And one of the good things about the 580 document too is it sets up what the party's anticipation is to enter a subsequent contract, because the teaming agreement only lasts through the proposal phase of the work. After that, once the job's actually awarded to the contractor, that they'll need to enter a subsequent agreement. And it's important to both parties to be able to establish the bounds of what that agreement is going to be early. So we provide two options. We either say you can use the D505 document, which is our engineering design builder subcontract, or you can provide a term sheet as an attachment to this that says, well, we haven't agreed on a form yet, but there's certain key terms which we think would need to be included in that subcontract, like an industry standard of care, any warranties that would be expected of the design, which is hopefully no more than the industry standard of care. It provides that structure within the document. The options are within this teaming agreement to provide those different subcontracting arrangements. One of the things I want to talk quickly about is, I was talking about some of these liability terms that are included in the teaming agreement. And what we're saying here is that, the design that we're providing here is for the limited purposes of providing this proposal technical form. And the intention of the document is not to construct or to use this for any sort of building operations. As you know, because a lot of times that owners will require even these early plans that you submit with a proposal to be signed and sealed by an engineer. And it's important that there's be no mistake that those are not intended to be for construction, or that they're providing a final set of technical documents. One of the other things that we've included in here, which is a big issue that I see when I go to the insurance and legal forms related to the industry, is quantities related, estimates related to pre-award work and design build applications. And where this comes up is where you're providing an initial 30% design that a contractor's then having to use to estimate his price proposal off of. And as you advance these designs from 30% to 60% to 90% to final, there is going to always be an expectation within the industry that the design is going to change somewhat as you advance that forward. And one of the biggest causes that we're hearing from the PL industry, or causes for claims that we're hearing from the professional liability providers, is where the contractors have based their bids off a number that they have estimated off of a preliminary set of plans. And as the design naturally advances, that number might increase or decrease. And the contractors are the design builders are using that as a basis of saying that is a professional liability claim because you've changed your design. Where if you look at the design bid build world, where they're typically bidding off final construction sets of plans, that's a big difference between, from an engineer's perspective, from the design build stage, design build procurement versus a design bid build procurement. Now let's go back to sit in the owner's shoes again. The owner selected a design builder. Now what does he need to do? And this is where we kind of get into the documents that are the, what I would call sort of, the base of the documents. These are the owner design builder contract forms. Now, when we looked back at the other thing where we were talking about the step 1 or step 2 in the RFQ, if we did select that step 1 that was the qualifications-based selection, the form that we provide for that is the progressive design build form, which is, like I mentioned, is a new document for our industry, and we're seeing more and more of these progressive design build projects that owners are wanting to go after because of, it decreases the amount of the project time and the procurement time, and hopefully, and with the hope to shift in the schedule forward to benefit the owner. One of the things that's important about this progressive design build form is that it sets up 2 stages, a preliminary stage and a completion stage. And in the preliminary stage, it's study and report services, drafting of preliminary technical documents, construction planning services. And then the step 2 stage is the completion stage, which is the completion of the technical documents, the construction, the startup, the testing, commissioning, all the things that we typically associate with a project. And the documents got all the language you would expect and anticipate in there, that if you get through the first process and you're unable to get to the price that you're looking for to move forward with the project, of how you would terminate the agreement or how the parties would part ways at that point if they couldn't reach an agreement at that point, or the price ended up being more than one of the parties expected. Some notes regarding this progressive design build document is that it's structured similar to the other documents that we have, the other 2 construction documents, the 520 and the 525. And we'll talk some more about how those are structured now. If you're the owner again and you're saying, well, I didn't want to do the progressive design build, I went through the process where I did an RFP, I got my technical proposal, my price proposal, how do I contract that work now? And that was the step that we talked about over here. The first form we would use, or that we provide for that, would be the 520, which contemplates a stipulated price. This provides the way that I see most design build projects procured is on this lump sum type basis. It also provides a unit price basis that leads into a stipulated price at the end as well. This form addresses a key number of provisions, including the contract time, when you expect the project to be done. You're setting an end date typically, and maybe some periodic dates, but you're not providing the full schedule that you would expect is not a part of this document, because usually that gets developed as the design's getting developed further in the project. But you're setting some bookends here during the process. It includes the price element, how you're going to get paid, and also talks about the site and some preliminary document representations that you might have been provided when you were looking at the initial project. One of the more important parts of this document is it defines, well, what other, and you've probably seen this in a contract before, it says, well, what other documents make up the contract? And here it's talking about that agreement, which would be this 520 documents, only the first part. You've got payment bonds, performance bonds, other bonds, the general conditions of the contract, any supplementary conditions you might have, conceptual documents, which would be the designs that were provided potentially by the owner as part of the RFP stage, any addenda, the design builder's proposal amendments, other exhibits to the agreements, and then some other documents that might come along subsequently, like the NTP, the change order, the change directives. And I think this kind of gets to the crux of design build. A lot of it is that it's a very document intensive procurement type, and so just in this 520 document, which is just the contract, you're talking about all these other contract documents that are coming in and being part of this document. And EJCDC does provide a lot of these forms, which we've covered some of them today, and we'll continue to cover the rest of them. But one of the things I wanted to stop and talk about here is that when looking at this design build series, I would recommend that people look at buying the whole family of the documents versus buying just the 520 document or the 525, because all the documents, if you've got a provision like this where you want all these other things to be part of the contract, it would be helpful, unless you want to sit around and, create, if you have your own general conditions, your own supplementary conditions, that would be great. But, I think that, we provide a lot of these forms for you, which can be a time saver, especially for what the price of the series would cost. The second document for the owner design builder is much like the first one we talked about, except now we're talking about setting it up on a cost-plus basis rather than a stipulated fixed fee, stipulated price type scenario. The next document that we talk about in this owner design builder series is the D700, which is the general conditions, which is really a lot of the meat of the contract. If you look at the 700 series, it talks about all these things that we anticipate we would come across the issues on design build projects and construction projects and design projects. A lot of it addresses, what rights do the parties have to rely on any information that the owner's provided you, or the site conditions, which is, always a heated, and if you look at a lot of the litigation regarding design build, that's what a lot of it addresses is the geotechnical reports that were provided by the owner and whether the design builder had any right to rely on those, or the initial survey information that was provided by the owner. It also addresses the change in claims procedure, which is a very important part of every contract from my perspective. The testing, inspection, the final payment, final inspection procedures, the suspension termination type clauses that you see in a lot of contracts, and then the dispute resolution procedures, which is another typical provision. We included in this series too a supplementary conditions document, which is a new document as well. But this provides you the flexibility to include the general conditions as is, and then be able to modify certain sections. And then we also provide a lot of examples of where we've made assumptions in the general conditions that, this will be the provision that you would want for a different site conditions clause. Within our supplementary conditions, we've provided examples of alternative languages of different types of provisions that you see a lot of variation in the design build procurement process. Some of the changes that we contemplate in this is, I've mentioned a lot of this here already. Some of the other ones are, hazardous environmental conditions, different alternative language for that scenario, insurance and bonding, the designer's standard of care and any design warranties. We've got, some options in there too. Different alternatives for permitting obligations. Who's got the responsibility for the permitting? That's a big risk in design build projects too, because it involves potential delay issues for third parties outside of the control with the permitting processes. We've got different options as to the submittals. We do have some with the shop drawing RFI submittal type process. One of the things that we've included in our series is an option that doesn't make that necessarily an owner's obligation to review those, but makes it the design engineer's obligation, who's a member of the design build team, to review those, which is, not typical of what you see have traditionally historically seen in the industry. Those forms have always gone, up through the owner to have at least a level of review and approval of those. From the design builder's perspective, now we're going to sit in his shoes again. Now I've got my contract with the owner. I had this teaming agreement with the engineer, but how do I now get my engineer on to finish my design? And that's this step of the process, bringing on a subcontracted engineer as part to provide design services. And as we know, a lot of times a design builder is a conglomerate or a single party who might be hold themselves out to be a general contractor as well. So, they might not have the design and engineering expertise on staff. The form we have for this is the D505 document, which is a form that we've had previously had as part of our series, but we've done a lot of updates to this document. It's really one of the cornerstone agreements for, the EJCDC organization representing the groups that we do, because this is the document that we're using to provide the design services. And also this document can be modified and tailored as well for providing construction inspection services as well. Now, so a design builder, he might want to bring on an engineer, but he also might want to bring on another large construction subcontractor, or also another just general contractor, which you would see a lot more in some building vertical type applications where the design builder might be serving just as in a construction manager type role. And that's this scenario here. The document we have for this is the D523 document. As we talked about, the design builder might choose to self-perform the whole project, but a lot of times you don't see that, and especially on projects where there are a public funding element that might have some DBE or SBE type requirements, which would require you to go out to the market and bring on some subcontractors. This D523 document replaces the old D521 subcontract for stipulated price, the subcontract for cost plus, and the subcontract general conditions. So we've brought all that into one document. Another important part of this document is that it incorporates the owner's design builder contract on what you might sometimes hear as like a flow down basis. That it'll say that all the terms and conditions of the document with the owner and design builder will apply to the subcontractor as applicable to their services. This is the type of provision you see a lot in design build projects, P3 type projects, where there might be one larger project that has, and a lot of times the owners even require that your subcontractors and contractors are obligated to you to the same extent that you're obligated to me, being the design builder. This document is, and for those familiar with our EJCDC documents, this 523 document is very similar to the C-Series documents that we have. Some additional design build series documents that we've included in this family. We have the performance bond and the payment bond documents, which are, we've gone through some updates of those as well, working with the industry. I was talking earlier about the liaison organizations that we work with. We've done a lot of outreach through both the insurance and surety industries as part of these updates to make sure that we're getting the best industry practices updated and incorporated into these forms. A few other D-Series documents we've included is the design builder's application for payment, which is, provides we talked about the different payment options earlier, and this form addresses all those different options that you can pick and choose from. And we've also provided in this series a new work change directive form and a change order form. Another document that is not necessarily included in the design build series, but it goes very well in conjunction with it, is the public-private partnership document that we put out in 2014. A lot of the big projects that we're seeing now within the industry are P3 type documents where public owners are looking for a private financing element to be able to provide a project of usually very large magnitude. A lot of these projects have a revenue function of some sort with them, like a tolling system. These types of projects are types that you typically see coming out through P3 procurements. With the P3 document series, you would have a owner who would typically have a contract with what they were going to call a public-private partnership. And then that public-private partnership would typically, for the construction and design portion of the project, would then serve as the owner in the design build series that we talked about. So you would have the owner that would have a contract with the public-private partnership, and then the public-private partnership would have a design build agreement with a design builder, and then even going further down like we were talking about before, then the engineer could then be contracted to the design builder. Needless to say, this can get very complicated very fast through these multiple procurement processes. But I think that looking at these documents, can be very helpful to a lot of parties in the industry, both the owners, the engineers, and the design builders, the public-private partnerships to help navigate through some of the difficulty and complexities of these newer procurements.